Ladies and gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson! You say you want some revelation, well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind.
Hey, welcome back everybody to the weekly Mormon News Roundup, where Al and D-Vase ruminate on the great and spacious beehive. This week we've got a lot packed in here this week. We're going to start off by showing you how the United States, and specifically D-Vase, is still reeling from the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And D-Vase, speaking of D-Vase, is going to continue where he left off last week with an advanced analysis regarding this case's impact on LDS Eschatology. I'm going to analyze Hulu's miniseries, That Mormon No More, Episode 2. It's a little bit more interesting to me than Episode 1 was. We're also going to review the latest Rolling Stones article, which claims that Mormons are starting to leave the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in favor of magic mushrooms. So we've got a really awesome show this week. How are you doing, D-Vase?
Hey, I'm doing better than I deserve. It's July 3rd, 2022, and this is episode 14. So I'm looking forward to this podcast more than any other podcast, probably except for our pilot. We've got some really good listener feedback on our last podcast. So for our listeners out there, if you haven't caught episode 13, you go back. I strongly suggest that you listen to it because it lays the groundwork for today's podcast. Now, our number one competitor out there, Al, for when it comes to Mormon news, aside from the church's official source, is called This Week in Mormonism. This Week in Mormons. And I listened to their last episode, and let me tell you, Al, there was 10 minutes of chit chat before we encountered even one news article.
Oh my!
I mean, they're chatting about what's going on in their families and things like that. That's not really what I'm looking for. I looked on there. They're also on Twitter. I looked on their tweets, and this week they tweeted out a poll for their listeners, and the question was, "Do you take off your garments when you go to visit the doctor?" And 60% of the people said yes, and 40% said no. That's honestly, Al, that is not really the type of thing that really captivates me. Maybe I concentrate on the wrong things.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were we talking about garments? I dozed off a little bit there.
Yeah,
We're not trying to give anybody some sleeping material here. We're going to give you the exciting stuff that's going to keep you on the edge of your seat.
However, Al, they are kicking our butts on listenership, so why is it that we're losing to them?
I think that they've got a lot more people that would prefer to hear the echo chamber of true believing Mormonism, and I think here we provide some more some meaty topics. You're not necessarily going to agree with every opinion that is expressed on this podcast, both for and against the church. But that's what this whole podcast is set up for. It's to be a meeting place where anybody on the spectrum, from a true believing apostle all the way to a seething, axe-grinding ex-Mormon, can get together and talk about the news topics that are currently going on around Mormondom.
Yeah, so I'll issue a challenge out to This Week in Mormons. Come on our podcast. We'd love to ruminate with you on the great and spacious beehive. One thing that they do very well, Al, is that they do have guest hosts. And this entire month, their podcast is being done by guest hosts so that the regular hosts can take a vacation. And that's something that I think we can learn from. So we're putting out the clarion call out there for any guest hosts who want to be a part of the program or even take over for us for a week. We'd be happy to have you. Just come on over to our website, which is Mormon News Roundup. Which is www.mormonnewsroundup.org, or send us an email to kolob@mormonnewsroundup.org. That's KOLOB at mormonnewsroundup.org with two N's, Mormon News. Okay, so some follow-ups, Al, from last week. We talked about the Yorba Linda, California temple dedication, right?
Yes, we did.
And we talked about how Elder Bragg said that it was a manifestation of the growth of the kingdom of God on earth, and that's the reason that temple was being opened, right? And we were a bit skeptical about that claim. Is that correct?
Well, we were a bit skeptical about how he was defining growth.
Okay, very well. Yes. Now, the reason I wanted to follow up is because Orange County, I went back and looked it up. It has 3.5 million people. I said that it was 7 to 10 million, so I misspoke there for correcting the record. Now, by the way, yeah, I guess so. In our show title, we talked about Roe versus Wade and eschatology. Al, what is eschatology anyway?
Eschatology was a new word for me. I'll tell you that. It's defined here as the part of theology concerned with death, judgment, and the final destiny of the soul and of humankind. So basically, what happens to the soul after you die? That's what eschatology is.
Right. And I think that Roe versus Wade has us and all abortion laws across the entire world have a significant impact on eschatology, which we will discuss in a moment. We're going to continue our deep dive from last week into the celestial ramifications of this law. You definitely don't want to miss it. So, the U.S. abortion laws out there in a real state of turmoil because everything's kicked back to the state level. So, state legislatures are passing laws every single day. Judges are striking down these laws. It's total chaos. Cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria.
Mass hysteria. Excellent quote from Ghostbusters.
Yes. Now, I saw a funny tweet that came out this week about Roe versus Wade. It's hard to make a joke about such a serious topic, but it's from the Cultural Hall. And this is at cultural_hall. And he does a lot of Mormon parody tweets, which I think are just hilarious. And he tweeted out on June 26, 2022, he said, quote, following the news from the Supreme Court, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announces that membership now begins at conception, instantly adding 90,000 members to the rolls. And baby blessings and namings will now occur in utero following a positive pregnancy test.
So, do they pick up the whole mom, or do they just place their hands on her belly? That's what I like.
He also tweeted out a picture that the mom then would be held in the middle with about 10 guys around and the hands on the stomach. You think this is a good idea, Al?
It's going to be kind of creepy. But hey, it's coming from the Cultural Hall, so that's all good and fun.
Yeah, he's got a lot of funny stuff out there. Very good. Now, last week we covered the wording change regarding abortion policy on the church's official website, and this week we are going to update that. Greg actually said he wondered. We had Greg from Quick Media on the program. He said he wondered if the wording of abortion policy would be changed in the church's handbook. Al, what is the church's handbook?
So the church's General Handbook of Instructions is pretty much what every church leader has, from bishops all the way up, to 70s and their authorities, to give them guidance on any topic that's going on in the world around them. So, this is basically their manual on how to approach anything from abortion to xenophobia or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. Now, do you have can you follow that link? Do you have that link pulled up that shows the wording change on abortion? Okay. Can you please read us what the before this ruling came down on June 19th, we have the verbiage from the old handbook, and then we're going to read out what the new handbook says. Can you read those two quotes to us?
Okay. So let's see. Snapshot from June 19th. Abortion is a most serious matter and should be considered only after the persons involved have consulted with their local church leaders and feel through personal prayer that their decision is correct. So that leaves it pretty open. To this, it's been changed. It should be considered only after the persons responsible have received confirmation through prayer. Members may counsel with their bishops as part of this process.
Okay, now those are the two quotes. What is the difference in between the change in policy here, Al?
I see that they've changed it from local church leaders to bishops specifically. So I guess maybe stake presidents don't need to be bothered with this sort of thing.
Well, I see it a little bit different. I think that bishop versus local church leaders is more incidental. The previous one said that you should only do an abortion after talking with your bishop. The new one says if you pray about it and feel good, you're good to go. And if you want to talk to your bishop about it, go ahead. So it went from it should be required to talk to your bishop first to you only need to involve your bishop if you feel like it.
Yeah, that's wow. That they went even more lax with it. Then they loosened the reins.
Yes, so that's usually not the direction that we usually see end up going in.
Yeah, exactly.
Any idea about why they would make this change to make the bishops a little bit out of the loop?
Well, boy, that I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I'm guessing. Yeah, I mean, this is something from the church has traditionally been extremely right wing, and I would think that a lot of church members were the types that were rejoicing over the overturning of Roe versus Wade. But as far as the church itself goes with its policies, they've decided to really just kind of lighten up.
Yeah, they have. So they're making abortion more of a personal matter that is something that is between you and God. You get a confirmation on it. And if you feel like involving your local leaders, go ahead, but it is not required anymore.
Yeah, that's when we say we're loosening up, it's just that much. I mean, it's just a real slight change, but it is a slight change that goes a little bit more away from conservative, maybe over toward liberal.
Yes, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit later, how the church's stance now is a little bit more liberal than some of the other Republican stances out there. We're going to get into that here in a minute.
Yeah,
So, we talked last week about how Roe versus Wade, how it's overturning has an impact on the celestial kingdom. And I got some listener feedback, and I need to clarify and improve what we talked about last week because I don't think my numbers were as complete as they could. So, let's talk about this more on the United States numbers. So, first of all, prior to Roe versus Wade, there's 600,000 U.S. abortions per year. That's per the CDC. That number is going to be cut in half approximately because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Now, what I neglected to mention last week is that there's also 600,000 miscarriages in the United States every year. Okay, so we
that's
also have
right.
about 25,000 stillborn and about 10,000 people die before the age of 8. But also, what I neglected to mention from last week is that according to the National Institutes of Mental Health, in 2020, there's an estimated 14 million adults age 18 or over in the United States with serious mental illness. We're talking about Down syndrome. We're talking about criminally insane, psychopaths, people who can't tell the difference between right and wrong.
Yeah,
That number
people with
represents.
diminished, what do they call it, diminished responsibility or something like that, capacity for, yeah,
I'm not familiar with the technical term, but according to this website, they call it SMI, serious mental. What do they? I'm sorry, serious mental
serious
illness.
mental illness. Yeah,
So 5% of the U.S. Adult population is seriously mentally ill. They don't know right from wrong, and they're not really responsible for their own actions.
yeah,
So about 2,000 of those people die every year, give or take. So
yeah.
let's review our numbers. According to these statistics, and remember, all of those people that I just mentioned,
Hmm.
abortions, miscarriages, stillborns, die before the age of 8, and seriously mentally incapacitated, seriously
Hmm.
mentally ill, they all
Yeah,
go straight to the celestial kingdom when they die.
yeah.
Now, so that's 1.3 million, and even after that's every year, the United States sends 1.3 million people straight to the celestial kingdom, automatic.
Hmm.
You're good to
Yeah,
go. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You're in. You're
good for
part of the.
them.
You're part of the. You're part of the club. Now, even
Hmm.
after Roe, that number is still going to be a million.
Hmm. That's right.
Okay, and this is in big contrast to the number of LDS Temple recommend holders dying annually, which we went over last week. My numbers were
Hmm.
good there. It's about
Yeah.
2,000 Latter-day Saint, U.S. Latter-day Saint Temple recommend holders dying annually and going to
Hmm.
the celestial kingdom. So go back and listen to our last podcast about that.
Yeah,
Now,
you really do need to listen to the last podcast before this episode because yeah, first of all, Greg was a heck of a nice guy to talk to. We
sure.
really appreciate him coming on, and this will all make sense a lot more more clear sense after you listen to that first.
Yes, he gave us some good feedback, and the listeners also gave us some good feedback. So even after
Hmm.
the Roe versus Wade overturn, there's still about a million folks in the USA who automatically go to heaven every year. This is a huge disparity between the automatics and all the
Hmm.
rest of us. It's a million versus 2,000. I mean,
Yeah,
that's like what is that, a 5,000 to 1 ratio?
yeah, exactly. It's huge.
It's a big difference. So now let's also extrapolate that through history, not just the United States right now, but let's talk about through the Earth's history. How many people in Earth's total history will go to the celestial kingdom? Now, mortality in times past, about half of everyone who lived on this planet, according to ourworldindata.org, about half of them died as a child, defined as dying before the age of 15.
Yeah,
Half.
yeah.
I mean, that's very hard for us to imagine in our modern day and age. We have clean water, indoor plumbing, vaccines, access to medical care, but life was extremely treacherous 1,000 years ago.
Oh, it was fragile. I mean, shoot, you looked at something the wrong way and you could die. I mean, yeah, that over the course of human history, death has been very, very common, and it's only in the last 100 plus years or so that we've really seen the boom in longevity.
Yes. Now, I wasn't able to get data about how many people in Earth's history have died before the age of 8 because that's a very arbitrary number, and that's really not how these health professionals track it. But we can extrapolate and estimate about a third of the people who have ever lived on planet Earth died before the age of 8. About a
Yeah.
third.
Hmm.
I mean, Al, what was life expectancy 30,000 years ago?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think it was late teens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was really low.
Yeah. It was maybe
Yeah.
15, 20 at the most.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, there were no grandparents back then. I mean,
Hmm.
you were lucky to even have a baby.
Hmm.
So that's again, there's been 120 billion humans on Earth.
Hmm.
40 billion of them died before the age of accountability. So that's 40 people straight to the celestial kingdom. Okay. Now
Yeah.
let's also talk about, according to human. I looked this up. According to Human Reproduction, Volume 34, Issue 11, in November 2019.
Hmm.
This is all on our show notes. About 30% of all pregnancies throughout all time, 30%
Hmm.
ended in a miscarriage.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, 120 billion humans on Earth. If 30% of all of those pregnancies we didn't get to see, that's 60 billion miscarriages in Earth's history.
It's huge. Oh, and we still have miscarriages all over the place today. It still
Sure.
happens, but thanks to a lot of our modern medicine, we're able to keep the babies viable a lot longer, and sometimes we can even prevent miscarriage if they catch it soon enough. Depends on what's causing it.
Yeah, it was certainly higher in times past, no doubt about that.
Certainly, yeah. Hmm.
Okay, so let's wrap up our final numbers. This is a revision from last week. So 120 billion humans have been on Earth, but a third of all pregnancies ended in a miscarriage or abortion. So that's another 60 billion that we never got to see. So that's
Hmm.
180 billion humans that were sent down here to try to live a life, but only 120 of them billion were actually born, right?
Wow, yeah. Hmm.
So the abortion rate today is as high as it's ever been. I mean, 25,000 years ago, humans really weren't very effective in committing abortions, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. Hmm.
okay, so 180 billion souls who came here to Earth. But remember, according to the plan of salvation of the Book of Abraham, a third of people, they didn't even come to Earth, right?
Yeah,
Who were those
exactly.
people? Who were
Oh,
those people?
these are the ones who said, "Well, Satan's plan is to save everybody. Let's go with him."
Right. Okay, so we have 120 billion who came to Earth, but we had 60 billion who were aborted or were miscarried, and then we have another 90 billion who are currently they're going to go to outer darkness because they chose Satan's plan. So that gives this total premortal population of this planet at 270 billion as of today.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a revision from last week, but I think these numbers are solid. So 270 billion is God's total creation thus far. 90 billion will go to outer darkness. 180 billion came to Earth. Only 120 billion were actually born. 60 billion were miscarried, and 40 billion died before the age of 8. About 7 billion are mentally handicapped, and 1 billion were stillborn. Okay, so
Hmm.
let's give the wrap up here.
Yeah.
270 billion premortal souls. 108 billion of those are automatically going to heaven. 90 billion of them are automatically going to hell. So that only leaves the last 72 billion who actually go through an actual test that counts on this earth. That's only like
That's right.
25%.
Hmm.
25% actually go through a test that actually matters.
Yeah, and this is all according to the plan, right?
But absolutely. This is the best design plan that has been
Hmm.
put forward in history.
Yeah. So, wow, those are some pretty astounding numbers. I mean, really, 1 in 4 souls that were created in the pre-mortal existence will actually have to take the test instead of just getting a freebie on it.
Right. Who will take a test that actually
Hmm.
matters. I suppose that a 7-year-old kid, he's taking a test, but the test does not matter.
Yeah.
If he dies when he's 7, that test doesn't count.
Hmm.
Now, Al, what is according to LDS theology, what is the main purpose of coming here to Earth?
I believe it was to gain a body and to be tested, right?
Yeah, but only 120 billion of the 270 billion actually got a body.
Hmm.
And out of those remainder of the 120 billion, remember a third of them died before the age of 8. So, I mean, just the amount of people, I thought the purpose was to get a body and come to Earth. Well, hardly anybody actually got a body. And those who came to Earth, so many of them fall into the other categories that uh, it's just a little bit, this is just a little bit strange.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, now remember, none of these numbers include the Neanderthals or the Denisovans or any of our other cousins. Remember, we share 99.9% of DNA with them, and we could still breed with them just a few thousand years ago.
That's
Um,
true.
most people who take a DNA test are like 4% Neanderthal and 1% Denisovans. Now, people who live in like Aboriginals in Australia are higher percent Denisovans because that's where the
Hmm.
Denisovans hang out. And if you're from Europe, you have
Yeah,
more percent Neanderthal. But I
sure.
mean, humans arose on this planet 250,000 years ago, and for the sake of these numbers, we will assume that all of our cousins don't have souls,
Hmm.
even though they're really similar to us in brain capacity, DNA, and everything. We're
Yeah.
not even going to include them because the number could be much higher if we did.
Yeah, that raises a really interesting point because at what percentage of your DNA makeup being Neanderthal or Denisovan do you become one of those? Do you become non-human and not Homo sapien that's actually being tested?
That's an interesting question because I read that the highest percent of Denisovans are Australian Aborigines, and some of them
Hmm.
are up to 17% Denisovan.
Wow, that's amazing.
I mean, because we could still interbreed with Neanderthals. They went extinct
Hmm.
30,000 years ago. We could still interbreed with them, and we could still
Yeah.
interbreed with Denisovans up to 15,000 years ago. And there's also another small tribe in like Papua New Guinea that
Hmm.
lasted until about 10,000 years ago. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to include all them because apparently they don't have souls. I don't know. I mean,
Hmm.
let's just exclude them for the sake of this argument.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to attribute some of these arguments. They were brought up by John Larson, a Mormon Expression. If you've never checked out his podcast, he's really the grandfather of some of these ideas.
Hmm.
Now, but let's take it one step further. I know we're going a lot of steps here. This is like Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade, where he has to continue to take the steps. Only the
Yeah.
leap from the lions, only the leap from the lion's den
Lion's mouth. Yeah. Hmm.
can you prove your worth.
Hmm.
So, okay, Al, let's talk about worldwide now. We looked at all of history. Only 25% of the people who are in God's creation will actually take a real test. Let's talk about how many people do you think are going to heaven automatically today per year? This is just ballpark.
Oh my goodness.
Just guess. Remember, there's seven. How many people do you think now on Earth now? Because we have people are living
Yeah.
longer. They're not dying before the age of 8. We don't have as many stillborns. We don't have as many miscarriages. So, how many people do you think are going to heaven every single year automatically today?
Oh, boy, let's see. We have. Let's see. I think the turnaround rate is about 2% per year of deaths to births and replacement. We should be just north of 7 billion people on the planet. So let's see. I'd say 140 million people.
That's a pretty decent guess here. Let's go over these numbers because we discussed how many people are going to the celestial kingdom in times past. Now it's still getting packed every day.
Yeah.
7.7 billion humans on Earth. About
Okay.
140 million humans are born per year. That
Hmm.
means we have about 35 million miscarriages, and according to the World Health Organization, we have 50 million abortions every year, and there's about 2 million stillborn, and then there's about 400 million severely mentally handicapped individuals on Earth. About
Hmm.
500,000 of them die annually. So, and
Wow.
about 10 million children die before the age of 8. If you add up all of those categories, okay, that we just went over, and those are all pretty well documented from CDC to World Health Organization to just basic math, 100 million people every single year in 2022 are going to the celestial kingdom annually.
Wow. That- That's got to be a big freaking kingdom.
Kolob has got to be a big place, Al.
I'll say.
Yeah, it's got to be a big place. Okay,
Mhm.
so this is in contrast. Okay, so 100 million people are automatic. You're just,
Yeah.
hey, you just stamp your passport. Thank you for playing. You're good to go. Thanks for playing. Now let's contrast that to the number of Celestial Kingdom worthy temple recommend holding Mormons who are passing
Hmm.
on annually. Okay.
Okay, so would be the people that are taking the test and actually passing it, per se.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So the global figures, there's 17 million or so Latter-day Saints. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that 7 million of them are active. It's probably less, but let's just aim high.
Hmm.
5 million of those have temple recommends.
Okay.
So according to the death rate, which is about 1 out of 1,000, it's actually a little bit
Hmm.
more, but let's just be very conservative. There's
Yeah.
5,000 temple recommend holding Mormons who die annually.
Okay.
And for the sake of argument, let's say that 90% of them go to heaven. That gives us a figure of about 4,500 annually throughout the whole world of
Okay.
temple recommend going
Hmm.
Mormons who die. So
Okay.
that's 100 million
Hmm.
for the automatics versus 4,500 for Latter Day Saints.
That's that's quite a stark contrast, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know where most of the adults who died yesterday, just take yesterday for instance, all over the globe are going to end up. But is it safe to say that the vast majority of them will go to the celestial kingdom? Is that a safe assumption?
Let's assume so. Mostly because we'll just assume that there was some sort of vice or sin that the vast majority of them had. So they love to sin, and therefore they end up in the celestial kingdom, right?
Even if they were very righteous, though, Al, without the
Mhm.
atonement of Jesus Christ, they're not going anywhere, right?
Yeah. So I really think that the highest or the smallest kingdom so far that we're looking at is the terrestrial kingdom.
Yes,
Yeah.
without question.
Hmm.
The terrestrial kingdom is going to be, you're going to have
Very
a lot of,
small.
it's going to be small proportionally. So
Yeah.
every single day, right now in 2022, there's about 25, about a quarter million automatic celestial kingdom deaths on Earth, and
Hmm.
only about 125 good Mormons are going to go to the celestial kingdom. So that's a
Wow.
2,000 to 1 ratio.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So, I mean,
Oh.
what we've come up with is the vast majority of the people who will be in the celestial kingdom are
Hmm.
miscarriages, abortions, stillborn, mentally handicapped individuals, or people who died before the age of 8.
Yeah.
It's a mathematical certainty. It
Yeah,
just
for
is.
sure. Hmm.
Now, Al, what was Satan's plan for us in pre-mortality? What was his plan?
His idea was to make sure that everybody made it to the highest degree of the celestial kingdom by removing agency or removing accountability. Just like, hey, let's save everybody, right?
Right? Yeah. But this plan that that I've thought about and that we've outlined here, there are so many people who are automatically in certain categories anyway that it seems like agency is only a few people are really
Hmm.
exercising agency today.
Exactly. So, I mean, the difference between our Heavenly Father's plan and Satan's plan was just like, oh, well, it seemed like Heavenly Father's plan. It's like, well, we gotta have some losers, right?
I guess so. You know, I, if I don't know if Al, if I know that if you look at the Gospel Topics essays and it talks about Mormons and getting their own planet, and I know that's
Hmm.
not in vogue anymore according to the Gospel Topics essays,
Yeah.
but I
Hmm.
prefer to think of it that if we do go to the great beyond, I would prefer to get my own planet. But remember, as soon as we create my planet, I know that I'm going to be sending at least 90 billion people to outer darkness to suffer
Hmm.
for eternity.
Yeah. It's a big
Right
chunk
off
of
the bat.
people. Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
I mean, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, just right off the bat, because this Earth, as we know, this is a very typical Earth.
Yeah.
So, all I can say is Satan's plan was in favor of automatic saving and no free agency, but the plan of salvation that we've outlined here, it has a
Hmm.
very high percentage of people who don't have agency anyway.
True.
I mean,
Yeah.
so let's just let's continue on. But
Hmm.
according to LDS doctrine, Al, who are the most valiant premortal souls?
Um, well, according to Brad Wilcox, his quote from the '90s, that it was going to be this generation that lived in the latter days, right? That our Heavenly Father. In fact, several prophets have said it throughout the. I think even David O. McKay, going all the way to the current, is like, oh, this is the chosen generation that needs to be prepared to welcome in the second coming. So this is the most valiant. This is the further forward we move in time, the more valiant the souls are that are coming down.
Okay, okay, that's. I think I've heard the same thing. I've also heard that mentally handicapped people are the most valiant. Have you heard that?
Yes. Okay. So that's the other thing is that there is that it says, well, there's some souls that were so valiant in the pre-existence that in order to protect them from the buffetings of Satan, the Lord sent them to earth in a handicapped body, especially a mentally handicapped, so that so that their responsibility would be diminished and they wouldn't have to pass the test since they were so valiant. They already passed the test in the pre-existence.
Speaking of the buffetings of Satan, remember those 90 billion souls are here on earth right now who are cast out of the premortal life and chose Satan's plan. Those are the
Mm-hmm.
demons that surround us, and
Yep.
there's 90 billion of them. There's only like 7 billion people on earth, so that's a lot of demons, Al.
Oh yeah, that's plenty to go around. I mean, uh, no, north of 10 demons per person.
Yeah, it sure is. And
Yeah,
one would imagine that if you were a demon that you would concentrate most of your efforts on Latter-day Saints, right?
yeah, exactly. I mean, because these are the ones, right?
Yeah, so the ratio of how many demons then would be on President Nelson? There could be a whole
Hmm.
lot of them. I mean,
Oh,
these
for
demons,
sure.
they don't need to be hanging out with these the telestial folks. They would be concentrating on Latter-day Saints in particular.
Yeah, and so far everything here aligns perfectly with LDS teachings. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that we would hear in a gospel doctrine class in a church on Sunday.
Let's do a thought experiment, Al, along these lines of who is the most valiant in the premortal existence. So let's
Okay.
line. Remember, there's 270 billion premortal souls. This is
Hmm.
beyond question. We know this.
Yeah.
Uh, let's line them all up and rank order them from the most valiant. That's like
Hmm.
Jesus at the head,
Okay.
then Joseph Smith, and
Naturally.
then Tucker Carlson. No, okay,
Okay.
not never.
For a
Okay,
second there, I was going to be on board with you. Okay. Yeah.
okay, scratch, scratch. Okay,
He
scratch
said
Tucker
so.
Carlson.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna to the least valiant, and that'd be
Okay.
like Rudy Giuliani, Kane, and then Lucifer, right? At
Okay.
the
Yeah.
end.
That's a pretty good, assessment.
Okay, you can agree with that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, certainly. Rudy Giuliani, he just couldn't pull off the same tricks that President Trump could.
Okay. I made sure that they were both Republicans, so no one
Mhm.
can accuse me of a liberal bias. But okay,
Gotcha.
they're all in line here. 270 billion people. They're all lined up in the pre-mortality because that was our first
Mhm.
estate, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and from the most righteous to the least
Mhm.
righteous, they're all lined up. Now,
Yeah.
where do you think that you would fall in this line, or anyone who lives today in particular would fall in this line? I know it's kind
Um,
of a tough
yeah,
question
that
there.
is a tough question. Somewhere between, I mean, if we put Jesus at 100 and
Uh-huh.
Lucifer at 0, and then put Joseph Smith 99, Tucker Carlson 98. Then Rudy Giuliani, I guess he would be number 2,
Okay.
and Kane would be number 1. Okay, so I would figure that you're probably somewhere in the 70s range, and I'm probably somewhere in the 50s.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, and the reason I want to do this thought experiment is because I believe that the most valiant people, if the
Hmm.
plan of salvation is fair, the
Okay.
most valiant people must, in my opinion, must be the miscarriages.
Yeah.
Why do you think that, I'm not trying to
Hmm.
have you read my mind, but what
Okay.
would be the argument for saying that miscarriages would be the most valuable and be very high up on the list, even ahead of people like LDS prophets or Mother Teresa or anyone else? Why would miscarriages be very close to the top?
Sure. I'll go along with you for the sake of this debate. So miscarriages are those are a natural way of getting a soul down to a body, and then having that body perish, so that the soul is then freed after gaining the body to go to its eternal glory. Right.
Right. Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. So they must have been very valiant because some of them would only needed to have a body just for a few seconds. The sperm
Hmm.
fertilized an embryo, and then
Yeah.
just even a few seconds later, the soul entered that because the soul starts at conception. A
Yep.
few seconds later, it miscarried. Something happened in the body, and they went straight to the celestial kingdom. If they're not the most valiant, I don't know who is because they only needed to
Hmm.
be on Earth for a few seconds.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying, and that would be then followed by abortions because
Hmm.
usually, you can't make an abortion until I don't know, it's something like, well, I mean, there's morning after pills and things like
Hmm.
that, I guess, but
Yeah, but we would, let's see. Even if we would, for those on the abortion is murder spectrum, let's say that this is shedding of the most innocent of blood. So the church has taught that those who die because their blood was shed and it was innocent go directly to the highest degree of celestial kingdom. So
okay, so
yeah.
again, from our
Hmm.
thought experiment of 270 billion people lined up, most valiant
Hmm.
is miscarriages, followed immediately by abortions, followed immediately by stillborns,
Yeah.
followed by childhood deaths, ranked by
Hmm.
how long you were alive,
True.
followed by the mentally handicapped,
Hmm.
followed by everyone else who really came here to Earth, and then
Hmm.
followed by the sons of perdition.
Yeah.
Would that
This
be
is
the rank order?
absolutely, this is according to the doctrine of the good die young.
Yes. So if you put all those people lined up, actually, you and I, Al, we would be somewhere definitely in the middle-ish, say a little bit towards the bottom, because there's so many people who are automatic celestial kingdom goers. But
Uh huh.
we would be middle-ish bottom we would be,
Yeah.
into like the 30 percentile towards the
True.
bottom.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess David O. McKay's not here to tell us, but you're white.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're,
That's a
we're, we're the fence sitters.
apparently we are the fence sitters because
Hmm.
if we had been more valiant, we would have been aborted
Hmm.
or we would have been
Absolutely,
stillborn.
for sure.
Those or mentally handicapped. Those people
Hmm.
must be more valiant because they didn't need to go through the test. They must have done such a good job on the premortal life that they
Hmm.
didn't need this earthly test.
Have we just completely flipped the entire reasoning behind Mormon theology on its head?
Well, this is all if we assume that the plan of salvation is fair and that God is just.
That's true.
Now, we can say, well, God's ways are higher than our ways, his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and we have a limited understanding. And maybe the plan of salvation is not fair at all, and everything that I've said here is wrong because God is not just. But if God is not just, doesn't he cease to be God?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Yeah.
So I really think that far from what everyone in the church teaches that, hey, we're in the latter days and you're the most faithful, I really don't think that that is the case. I think that there's a lot of people who are more faithful, um, who are already in paradise as we speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, actually, I just thought about this. The most faithful of all would be the very first people after Adam and Eve gave birth.
Mhm.
Those very few miscarriages,
Yeah.
those must be the absolute goats of valiancy because they didn't have to wait in premortal land for getting a birth. They got to go here, boom, and now they're in spirit paradise.
Some parents have their favorite children.
Yeah. So because some people who haven't been born yet, they're still waiting in the premortal existence, which is not paradise. I mean,
That's right.
Saturday's Warrior kind of tells us what it looks like, but that's just folklore.
Yeah, exactly.
We could also rank order that the human line according to how fast they came and then how fast they went up to heaven.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
you, that's just a thought that I thought of, and I do want to talk about what Joseph Smith said about this particular topic.
Hmm.
And you think, well, Joseph Smith didn't mention abortions, and he didn't mention stillborns, did he? Well,
Hmm.
actually, he sort of did. On April 7th, 1844, Joseph Smith rose to speak
Hmm.
at what would prove to be his last conference and became known as the King Follett Discourse, which was at a funeral for a man named King Follett
Hmm.
who died when he fell down a well. Okay,
Oh.
now there was four note takers at this particular sermon, Al, and only
Hmm.
one out of the four got this quote, but it is in the
Hmm.
Wikipedia entry. Can you read? And this kind of talks about
Yeah.
what's going to happen with all of these children and infants and things in the eternities. Will you read the quote here that we have from that?
Absolutely. A question may be asked: will mothers have their children in eternity? Yes, yes, mothers, you shall have your children, for they shall have eternal life. For their debt is paid, there is no damnation awaits them, for they are in the Spirit. But as the child dies, so shall it rise from the dead and be forever living in the learning of God. It will never grow. It will still be the child, in the same precise form as it appeared before it died out of its mother's arms. But possessing all the intelligence of a god, children dwell in the mansions of glory and exercise power, but appear in the same form as when on earth. Eternity is full of thrones upon which dwell thousands of children, reigning on thrones of glory, with not one cubit added to their stature.
Okay, now this particular quote was edited out of the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith, but what do you get? What is Joseph Smith trying to tell us here in this particular passage?
That wow. There's a first of all, mothers are going to be able to raise their children that they've lost, um, you know, tragically, and so that's a very pleasant thought, and gives a lot of people comfort and hope for the hereafter that they will be able to see their children again. But then there's another thing where it goes a little bit crazy. He says it's full of thrones with like children sitting on these thrones, and of the different ages at which they died. I mean, you have some that died when they were 4, you have some that died in arms, you had some that were stillborn. Okay, and as we've talked before, you've had some miscarriages, you've had some abortions. So these children are going to the highest degree of the celestial kingdom to sit on a throne at the same stature, the same size, same height, everything, in the same body that they left behind.
Not one cubit added to their stature.
That's right.
So since we know that the celestial kingdom is filled with it's going to
Hmm.
be mostly filled with abortions, miscarriages, stillborns, and people who died before the age of 8. The
Hmm.
celestial kingdom, Al, how tall are you, by the way? Let me just ask you this first. How tall
I'm
are you?
5'6".
Okay, hey, I'm 5'7", and don't you forget it.
Yep,
Okay,
we're both
in
shorties.
in the great beyond, Al, we are gonna if we're there, we're gonna come out on top on the height. We are going to
Oh,
be giants,
well, that's a pleasant thought. Good
right?
for us.
Yes, I like this. This is
Yeah.
starting to shape up. I like the sound of this. The more that I think about
Hmm.
it,
Yeah.
um, those children will never grow. So I think that Joseph Smith, everything that I said in here conforms with what Joseph Smith said. He said there'll be thousands of children. Well, actually, there'll be millions.
Hmm.
It'll be filled with all these little babies and these
Yeah.
little toddlers and these little kids reigning on thrones.
Hmm.
They will never grow up, and
Yeah.
that's just an interesting
The,
mental picture.
well, and yeah, he says they will never grow up, so they really will be perpetually in the same state for eternity. So they will forever be children. They will forever be a zygote. They'll forever be a clump of cells.
I don't know. Let's not take it too far. I don't know.
Hmm.
That's one of the great mysteries. Maybe that's one of the great mysteries. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We did talk about the Roe versus Wade last week with Greg from Quick Media, who came on the program. And shout out to Greg. He does a great
Hmm.
job.
Yeah,
Uh,
certainly.
CWIC Media does. He's like the greatest gospel doctrine teacher you've ever had. He's very
Yeah.
smart. He's very sharp. He does a great job.
Oh,
Now,
brilliant perspective on things.
yes. Now he disagreed that God would be in favor of overturning Roe versus Wade because he
Yeah.
said that human life is sacred, therefore abortion is wrong. Now I
Hmm.
want to ask you, Al, is human life sacred in the scriptures?
Um, well, scripturally speaking, no. It comes and goes. I mean, the Lord has no problem wiping the face of the earth as He sees fit. I mean, the flood of Noah, He saved 8 souls. That's it. The going all the way back even before then, even after then, you've got all kinds of different stories throughout the Bible and the Book of Mormon. I mean, shoot, the Lord sat there watching with, was it Alma and Amulek, while the
Yeah,
Lamanites were murdering children and women. And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Now, remember, humans have been on this planet for 250,000 years, and
Hmm.
apparently God did not intervene. There was bloodshed, there was wars, there was rape, there was tortures, there was murders, and
Yeah.
God only started intervening about, I don't know, 6 or 7 thousand years ago. So for 93,000 years, He sat on His hands and did nothing.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
while there's rape, tortures, murders, and lots of tribal warfare, didn't lend a hand,
Yeah.
didn't lend a finger to help the inhabitants of this planet.
Yeah.
So, and if we look in the Bible, think about God commanded Abraham to kill his own child. The Israelites wiped out the Canaanites. There's a genocide of the Amalekites.
Yeah.
Jesus in Third Nephi, he wiped everybody out before he came over and visited
Hmm.
in Third Nephi chapter 9 and 10 with the
Oh
earthquakes,
yeah.
the volcanoes. You have the
Hmm.
law of Moses. How many things can you do to be put to death in the law of Moses? There's a lot. I don't know.
Oh
I don't know
yeah.
how many there is.
Well, and that is the punishment for just about all of them. Is yeah, put them to
Yeah,
death.
yeah. And remember, Nephi killed the unarmed Laban. You have
Uh-huh.
the God killed Job's presumably innocent family. I mean, what did they
That's
do?
true. Yeah, his
I
wife
don't know.
and kids.
I
Yeah.
don't know what they did. There's the
Hmm.
burning of the untithed at Jesus' second coming. If you do not pay tithing
Hmm.
to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you will be burned. I mean,
Yeah.
I could go on and on, but the big coup de grace is that God actually killed Himself on the cross. So the
Yeah.
idea that
Hmm.
that human life is sacred in the Scriptures,
Hmm.
it doesn't seem to me that the Scriptures back that up.
No, it seems like more realistically, human life is a renewable resource. We can always make more.
I mean, and we've discussed in this podcast that there's 270 billion souls ready to go.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I know it says thou shalt not kill, but that is doesn't seem there seems to be so many exceptions from
Hmm.
that law. Now,
Yeah.
Greg also said last week that he didn't like this line of reasoning because he thought of the pain of abortion of the people
Hmm.
who are committing abortions. Now,
Hmm.
I'm not trying to make light of anyone or anything. Somebody who
Yeah.
faces has to have an abortion or chooses to have an
Hmm.
abortion for any reason. I can't imagine having to
Yeah.
bring a child into this world who's, I don't know, fetally deformed, or
Yeah.
if I was raped and I was having to raise somebody else's child, or whatever
Hmm.
reason.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I never have to face that, and
Hmm.
I don't want to mock anybody who has had
Sure.
that made that choice or is facing making that choice.
Yeah.
Okay, but I do want to say that mostly the people committing these abortions are telestial. That's
Sure.
because most of the people on this earth are telestial people. That's not a put down. It's just a fact.
Hmm.
So it's telestial people they will still be telestial people whether they can commit a legal abortion or not. That's not going to change.
Yeah. But how many of these abortions were products of fornication or adultery? I mean, so they're from telestial type people, and the choice to let's say elective abortion. I mean, certainly, you know,
Yeah. regardless of why they chose to have the abortion or the circumstances, most people
Yeah.
on this planet are telestial people. So the only
Hmm.
thing that changes with the Supreme Court ruling is
Hmm.
where their unborn children are probably going to go in the next life.
Yeah.
Because their children, if they're born, will be telestial children for the most part. The Church of Jesus
Hmm.
Christ of Latter-day Saints, its percent of global, it's losing ground with regards to the global population. The global
Yeah.
Earth's global population grew 1.8% last year. The Church of
Hmm.
Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints only grew at 1.5. It's losing ground. So
Hmm.
these people who are committing abortions, whether they can do so legal or not, if they're still going to be celestial people, it's only their offspring who will probably then, instead of going to the celestial kingdom, they will go to the telestial kingdom.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
Now, Greg also said that fetuses and miscarriages, although they do go to the celestial kingdom, they'll be at a disadvantage in our next life. And I just want to ask our listeners,
Hmm.
where is that in the scriptures or in church doctrine? I'm not familiar with it. Have you heard that before, Al?
Um, he's got a good logical reasoning to back that up, and that there's certain lessons that we learn from living life in mortality that you can't learn otherwise. So, uh, as far as backing it up scripturally, I can't. I don't. I mean, I don't think there's an actual quote that I could give you that says this is doctrine. It's an apologetic argument, I would say.
Now, okay, for our listeners out there, if you know where we could find that information, please come on over to
Yes,
we're
please
on
do.
we're on Twitter at News Mormon, and we're also on Facebook and YouTube as well. Will you come over, drop us a line, let us know where we can find the information that says that if you were aborted or if you were stillborn, that you will have a disadvantage in the next life, because
Mhm.
I'm not familiar with that. And I just want to ask the question, how could that be fair? Okay, so you were in the premortal life. You
Mhm.
chose Jesus's plan. You did everything you were supposed to do. You came to this earth. It was a miscarriage, to no fault of your own. You go to the great beyond, and you're at some big disadvantage. How is
Mhm.
that fair?
Yeah, that's a that's a tough question. Fairness being that I guess our mortal existence and the trials that we go through in life are supposed to be catered specifically to us, but I don't know. It seems like you got a lot of disparity between where some people start out and the kinds of loads they have to carry versus others.
Yes, and that's what I want to get into next. And I just say it doesn't seem very fair if you're aborted and through no fault of your own, you go into the great
Mhm.
beyond, and that you're at a big disadvantage. That does not seem to be fair. And I thought that the plan of salvation is supposed to be fair.
Well, and keep in mind that these are clumps of cells that will be sitting on thrones throughout for the rest of eternity, not having one cubit added to their stature.
Well, I just hope that I have 1 cubit added to my stature when I get to the great beyond. That's all I can say.
That'd
Um,
be nice.
Now, I just want to say, what would a fair plan of salvation look like? And Al, I'm actually a big video gamer. I guess
All right.
I really don't get into this in this podcast, but my claim to fame is that in 1995, I played in the largest video game competition of all time. There's 250,000 people who played in this tournament from
Oh
all
wow.
across the globe, and I
Hmm.
ended up placing fifth. So I guess that's my claim to fame is that I'm a big.
Holy
I used to be a big video gamer.
wow! I'll say.
Yeah. Now I
Good for
think about
you.
well, I guess so. I guess so. Now, if you think about a fair plan of salvation, if you and I were to go into a video arcade, we put in 25 cents and play Mario Brothers
Hmm.
on an arcade game. I play through, try to get a high score, and they get a
Hmm.
score at the end. Then, game over. Then you put
Yeah.
in your quarter, you play the
Hmm.
game, and you get your score. We can compare the two against each other, and we can
Sure.
see who the better gamer is.
Exactly. Hmm.
And that's the problem with the current plan of salvation that we have is that I'm white, I'm male,
Hmm.
I'm heterosexual, I'm wealthy, I was born in the covenant,
Hmm.
etc. This plan of salvation,
Hmm.
the life circumstances that we all end up in, as you just said a moment ago,
Hmm.
they're not remotely equal.
No, the starting point is different for every person. So yeah, I mean, when you start with Super Mario Brothers, you know that right at the very beginning, there's going to be, that little mushroom guy, the Koopa that you guy jump on, and then get your mushroom to grow up and all that stuff. But that's the same for everybody. It's not like you start off with a handicap that there's a 10-second delay on your jump button. Uh, Yeah.
Or you could think about role playing games. I play Dungeons and
Hmm.
Dragons as well. Some of these
Sure.
role playing
Hmm.
games, you have what are called NPC characters in role playing games, and there's a
Yeah.
small level of randomness, but everyone
Hmm.
still has about 95% of the same experience with the same challenges and same tests.
Yeah, for
If
sure.
I were to design a plan of salvation, I would design it so that it would be fair for everyone and that
Hmm.
everyone would have the same type of challenges. But
Yeah.
again, that's just how I would run things. I guess that's why I'm not
Hmm.
running things, Al.
I guess not. But I'll say the Olympics seem a lot more fair.
Yeah, I just, according to Satan in the LDS endowment, this planet is very
Hmm.
typical of what has been done in other worlds. So
Yeah.
this particular plan of salvation, the system that we've discussed today, it's been
Yep.
perpetrated apparently according to Brigham Young. Every father had a father, every god had a god, and
Hmm.
Joseph Smith said, he took the ring off on his hand and he said it's one eternal round and it's all, it's eternity in all directions. And I just wonder, is this really the best way to test people with all of these automatic categories and all of this unfairness? This is the best system that can be designed.
I'm starting to think that Heavenly Father was an aborted fetus.
Well, very likely, as we discussed last week,
Yeah.
that's
Hmm.
we discussed last week that the vast majority of people who are in heaven will be
Hmm.
as the automatic categories. The ratio is overwhelming, 2,000 to 1, 5,000 to 1.
Yeah.
And that very likely God was he was a stillborn, he was an abortion, he was a
Hmm.
miscarriage of some kind, or maybe he was mentally handicapped.
Yeah.
um, and that's just a likelihood just based on statistics.
That's that's very reasonable to looking at this statistically speaking. It's far more likely that he is an aborted fetus than he's not.
Absolutely. Now, President Kimball, we're almost done with this line of reasoning here.
Okay.
President Kimball, he explained that, quote, "We made vows, solemn vows in the heavens before we came to this mortal life," end quote. And
Okay.
this was a sentiment that's been echoed by a number of church leaders, including President Nelson in 2018. So
Okay.
I'm asking you this, Al, since so many people have been aborted, miscarriage, and stillborn, or a mentally
Hmm.
handicapped person, I mean, they can't keep a covenant, right? I mean,
Yeah.
why would all of these stillborns, miscarriages, and
Hmm.
abortions, why would they need to make a premortal covenant to God
Hmm.
with God knowing that they would not be able to keep that covenant?
Um, is this maybe they were an exception? I don't know. That's a I guess that's an easy covenant to keep, or an easy vow to keep. Like, okay, well, I promise to be faithful. Well, we're just going to remove your responsibility to be faithful. Okay, well,
Well, I also think about the application of my own life. How can I fulfill a promise of a covenant that I have no memory of making?
that's another tough one. And I know that there's. I mean, I saw the movie What Happens in Vegas.
Hmm.
So so that was kind of the theme behind that movie is, hey, we got super wasted last night. We went and got married. Now we need to get an annulment, and the judge is like, no, I'm sentencing you guys to 6 months of hard marriage.
it
So
just it's just a tough test to I made promises and covenants to God before I came to this earth. I have no memory of them. How can I keep these promises when I have no memory of making them?
that's not the judge's problem.
Oh, it's kind of like it's kind of like the terms of service. If you click agree at
Right.
the bottom of it, then what is in the terms of service, whether you read it or not, you've got to abide by it.
So true. How many of us have just clicked? Okay, yeah, I agreed to all the terms and service, and I mean, 99% of them are all just a copy and paste of the other 99%. But it's still something that we all do it just because we don't have the time to sit and read.
Well, I mean, I would like to see those people who click those terms of service, at least they have the option to read it. I
True.
apparently I don't have the option of knowing what exact covenants that I made with Heavenly Father.
Hmm.
I can't review my signature on that, so it's pretty
Yeah.
hard to live up to something that I don't have a
Hmm.
memory of.
Exactly. Maybe that's what patriarchal blessings are for.
Maybe so. Let me
But I
just
don't know if you can ask a patriarch, hey, could you, just see if you can determine what covenants I made beforehand?
Well, I thought the patriarchal blessings are more forward seeking. I don't think a lot of them talk about the premortal
Yeah.
life. I don't
Like,
know.
no, there's you'll get things like, oh, you were a valiant spirits in the premortal life, and oh, our heavenly Father reserved you for this time because of your sort of thing. But yeah, you don't get a lot about, oh, you made. They may mention you made sacred covenants, but they won't say what those covenants were.
Well, as we discussed, I don't think that a lot of people who are alive today are on the most valiant scale. A patriarchal blessing that
Hmm.
says you're the most valiant, how can that be true? Because the most valiant people are already in spirit paradise, and they were already abortions and miscarriages, and they didn't even need to come here, so they must be the most valiant. So
True.
let me just summarize. Okay, most Latter-day Saints are rejoicing about the overthrow of Roe versus Wade, but they
Yeah.
should be aggrieved. This
Hmm.
ruling must fill God with profound sadness. Why? It's because 300,000 less souls will return to Him each year.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now, I know that this difference isn't much compared to the fact that there's 50 million abortions done globally each year, but as Joseph Smith taught, quote, the worth of every soul is great in the size of God, end quote. Right, Al?
Yeah. That's right.
Okay.
Hey everybody, it's D-Vase here. Thanks so much for listening to the Mormon News Roundup. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Allow me to explain. Anchor has the tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. This podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Signature Books, www.signaturebooks.com. We invite you to check out their latest book written by Romney Burke, which is entitled Susie Young Gates, Daughter of Mormonism.
Brigham Young had over 50 wives and 56 children, but none has better name recognition than daughter Susa Young Gates. She lived from 1856 and died in 1933. Yet she, like so many women of Mormonism's past, has remained a mystery to most church members. In Susa Young Gates, Romney Burke, the author, paints a portrait of a strong woman who rose to prominence within the church, fought for the rights of women throughout the country, yet dealt with personal trials and her share of heartbreak.
Now, that's that's summarizing from our last week. Now, let's get into the news articles here, which this first one is on abortion. Now, this is published by, and this is in our show notes here. This is by Jana Reese on June 29th, 2022. And it says Mormons now look liberal on abortion by not changing it. So it says the GOP has swung so far to the right that Mormons' nuanced abortion stance, once commonly accepted by fellow conservatives, now looks liberal by comparison. You don't see a lot of news articles, Al, that says that Mormons are liberal.
No, you don't. They're
So I
pretty
mean,
right wing.
yeah. So I mean, what is the difference between the standard GOP's position now and the church's position on abortion now?
It seems like the GOP took a hard shift to the right, especially with this the motion of the Supreme Court, that 6-3 motion. So this, by comparison, it just makes the LDS Church, with its attitude of laissez-faire when it comes to abortion, do what you feel right about. It seems very left of that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the laws that are being passed in Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Kentucky, Louisiana, Missouri, Oklahoma, Ohio, all of these other states, they're
Hmm.
basically saying that we're going to have extremely restrictive abortion laws where a lot of them don't even have any exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother, or even, fetal viability.
Hmm.
And that's a big difference from the church's position. The church's position is that, you can have an abortion if for those reasons. If the life
Yeah.
of the mother is in danger, if there's fetal anomalies, if there's a rape or an incest. And did I leave one off? I forgot what the last one was.
Let's see.
I think those are the basic
Yeah,
the basic exceptions.
that covers most of them.
Yeah. So I mean, the church is because the GOP is swinging so far to the right, the church is now looking liberal. Utah is actually somewhat liberal among red-leaning states,
Hmm.
which I think is a real difference from what we've seen in the past. And
It
Al,
certainly is, yeah.
remember,
Mhm.
who do we have to thank most for this Roe versus Wade ruling, Al?
Senator Orrin Hatch, thank you
Yeah.
so much. The long-term senator from Utah who passed away last year.
Now, wait a minute. You say that Orrin Hatch is most responsible for this Roe versus Wade. We did discuss this in a previous episode. What is your rationale for that?
Well, he was the one that opened up the Supreme Court to getting, heavily right-wing sided, and he was on the judicial committee to screen the justices. So,
He's the
yeah,
one who, hey, they're not, he's the head of the Judicial Committee. They're not going to hold a hearing for any judge without him.
that's right.
And they didn't. He kept Merrick Garland, Obama. Remember
Yep.
Obama's
Hmm.
Supreme Court nominee? He kept him out.
Yes, he did. Hmm.
So I mean, we can really thank all of the mess, all of this.
Hmm.
We can lay it really right at the feet of Orrin Hatch. And as I've discussed,
Single-handedly. Yep.
pretty much, pretty much. And as I've said, I don't think that God is in favor of what Orrin has done here, because I think that God's great joy is to bring souls unto Him, and because of Orrin
Hmm.
Hatch, many fewer souls will be going to God.
Yeah. Maybe Orrin will make out all right in the end if he paid enough tithing. I don't know.
Wow. Ow, that's terrible.
I
That is
know.
terrible.
I should apologize to our Orrin Edge loving listener, whoever you may be.
All right. Our
Yeah.
next article, Al, can you run us through our next article?
Yeah, so we're going to head over to the Rolling Stone. This one's a little bizarre, okay? And this one is titled, These Mormons Have Found a New Faith in Magic Mushrooms. And this is not entirely unrelated to Orrin Hatch. This deals in a former senator from the Utah legislature. So not a federal senator, but a state senator. The article's from June 28th, 2022 by Cassidy Rosenblum. And it talks about, let's see, Steve Urquhart, who was he was a pretty big name around the legislature back when we had Governor Herbert. Yeah, I remember hearing his name a lot. Steve and his wife Sarah have now formed this what would you call it? It's kind of an offshoot of the LDS Church, but it's called the Divine Assembly. And what it really focuses on is getting magic mushrooms or psilocybin into its sacraments. So it takes people on acid trips or on psilocybin trips, and gets them to try and connect with God through the use of magic mushrooms. Which to tie it back to, I've already tied it to politics. I'm going to tie this to Joseph Smith too. There was a lot of mushrooms growing around the forests around Joseph Smith's home. There is a lot of people that have that theory that Joseph Smith was under the influence of magic mushrooms during a lot of his revelations, and that was how he connected with God.
Where do I sign up for this Divine Assembly where I can, get,
yeah,
magic mushrooms and all that stuff?
it's a kind of a cute little gathering in Salt Lake City, Utah. This is not a place where they have a lot of members. They've got maybe 2,000 to 3,000 at any given time, and they say, well, not everybody that leaves the LDS Church is going to land here, but this is a safe place where they can land if they want to. So, this is a place where they welcome everybody, and they use these mind altering drugs as a way to find the channel towards this. I believe they call it the sacred rather than the divine, because they want to, get away from the idea that there is like a celestial being that needs to be found, but more like a celestial entity that is this sacred idea or concept, and that's what they're looking for.
I'm a little bit surprised that they have so many members. They've only been around for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
They have
Yeah,
2,000 or 3,000 members.
a little surprising, yeah, but they've got some pretty notable ones. Someone by the last name of Bennett. He is a descendant from the founders of Mormonism. They've got some pretty good people. Like I said, some of their most prominents were a former state senator from Utah. So
I
yeah,
guess we'll be keeping our eye on what they call themselves the Divine Assembly.
yeah, the Divine Assembly. So look them up if you want to go take some mushrooms and some psychedelics with them. So.
Okay. Now, Al, our next article. How's the drought going out there in Utah, by the way?
Not so good, not so good, especially on the south end of the state. The Great Salt Lake is drying up. We considered doing an article about that last week, but we'll delve into that a little bit better this week. It's rough. We're real low on water out here.
Oh, that is too bad. Now John Oliver, the famous comedian who does the what does he do? The weekly
Yeah,
what's the show?
yeah. The what is it?
I forget the name
Not
of his
week,
show.
so not weekly edition. What is it? It's This Week Tonight. Yeah.
Yes, This Week Tonight. Now, he mocked Utah and its response for its drought coverage, and this has been making the round. So I'm going to try to
Hmm.
play the clip here. Got a 30-second
Yeah.
clip of John Oliver on Utah's drought.
Watch this video from the governor of Utah in response to drought conditions there just last year.
We need more rain, and we need it now. We need some divine intervention. That's why I'm asking Utahns of all faiths to join me in a weekend of prayer.
Wow! You know Utah is desperate when they ask all faiths to join in a prayer. I'm asking Utahns of all faiths, whether that's the Mormon one or one of the many wrong ones, to collectively...
Okay, so did that come through pretty well?
That came through pretty good. I want to clarify. He said at the end that the governor of Utah is asking people of all faiths, whether that's the Mormon faiths or maybe one of the other several wrong ones, to pray for rain.
Now, so the governor asked for a day of prayer. Do you? What was that? Was that like a week ago, or I think it was a?
Yeah, I think so. And
about a week.
Yeah, it was about a week ago.
And have you been seeing things improving at that time?
No, it's yeah, it. There hasn't been enough rain to, or well, I'll say, on the northern end of the state, they're doing pretty good. But when it comes to the southern end of the state, boy, there's a lot of bright red areas, and where and those bright red areas. This comes from like what is it, the National Geological something or other, but where they measure the rainfall and the snowpack, and most of the state, I'd say a great 90% of it, anything except for like the Bear Lake area, is in severe drought conditions. Severe drought.
That is unfortunate, but I do have the bright side for you here, Al, is that I think we've got the solution to solving Utah's drought problem.
I hope so.
Made easy here by Elder Ballard.
Okay.
So it looks like the weekend of prayer didn't work. Even though maybe it was because probably those guys with the psychedelic mushrooms, they were probably praying along too. Maybe we shouldn't have included them. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe so.
I don't know. It looks like that didn't work, but don't worry. I've got the solution for you, and it's here. Elder Ballard of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He talks about how, quite frankly, how easy it is to solve a drought problem. So let me play this clip for you.
In fact, Elder Ballard says he once prayed for rain in the middle of a drought.
Let it rain. And before we left the temple, it was raining.
In fact, Elder Ballard says...
Wow. Did you catch that?
Yep. So, Elder M. Russell Ballard, please go into the temple and once again ask the Lord, please let it rain. Because dang it, we need some rain. The Great Salt Lake is drying up. We're on the verge of annihilating this state because as this Great Salt Lake dries up, there's a lot of toxic chemicals that are going to start to fill the air. So get your pasty white butt into the temple, please, and get us some rain.
Well, he seemed to make it sound like it was pretty easy. You pray, you use the priesthood, and that literally right before they even came out of the temple, it was already raining.
I'm sure that's exactly how he found his keys so he could drive over to the temple that morning too.
Well, oh man,
that's what it sounds like to me.
Oh boy. Oh god,
I'm gonna make some friends this week.
Yeah, you're making a lot of friends here. You're making a lot of friends, Al. It does remind me in the Old Testament, in 1 Kings chapter 17, where we read now Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the settlers of Gilead, said to Ahab, quote, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, surely there shall neither be dew nor rain these years except by my word," end quote. And you know what? It came to pass that same way, Al.
Sure
Elisha,
did.
He controlled the rain.
Yeah, he did.
Why can't we do it again? We have the same priesthood power. In fact, Elijah himself came to Joseph Smith to restore priesthood power.
Yeah, and this was a very flashy very showy use of the priesthood power, because Elijah, the Tishbite, this is right before he does the whole, we're going to build 2 altars, and you guys pray to Baal and ask him to set your altar on fire, and I'll pray to the God of Israel and ask him to set the altar on fire, and whoever's God answers first wins, right? I mean, this is a pretty famous Bible story, and lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. Is that the priests of Baal were cutting their wrists, showing their determination, begging Baal to come and light their altar on fire. And Elijah, after he's done mocking them and sitting there laughing at them, he sits down and says, "Okay, God of Israel, do your thing." And immediately fire comes down from the heavens, consumes the altar, consumes the water that's in the trench that they've dug around the altar, and consumes the priests of Baal too. It was, once again, sanctity of human life.
Yeah, I just, we read about these stories in the scriptures about
Mm-hmm.
prophets and their prophetic ability to do amazing and miraculous things
Mm-hmm.
when the time, when we really need them.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't something about, we shouldn't tempt God. This is what prophets have done all throughout the scriptures. It's
Yeah,
not about tempting God. It's about showing his power. So do it.
yeah. Elder Ballard seemed to make it sound like it was pretty easy.
Exactly. And,
You just
he is a sustained prophet, seer, and revelator. So if it's that easy, do it.
Yeah, you take the quorum of the 12, you go into the temple, you say a
Mm-hmm.
prayer, and before you come out, it's raining. So I call on
Yep.
Elder Ballard to go ahead and fulfill what he said that he could do, and
Mm-hmm.
let's end this drought.
Yeah. About dang time.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 3 last articles to go through here, Al.
Okay, and this one I'm going to go pretty quick. Okay, so it comes from religionnews.com, how Mormons are sabotaging marriage and the family. This one, it sounds a little strange, doesn't it, to hear, for as being family centered as the LDS Church is, it's kind of funny to hear a stark contrast saying, well, they're destroying the family.
This is anti-Mormon lies, Al. This is absolute.
It has to be, right?
Yeah.
Has to be anti-Mormon lies. This is by Jana Reese, June 24th, 2022. And she talks about when she had a young missionary over, and this is something that has been going around since they've been sending missionaries out, right? Is missionaries talking about, well, the harder you work on your mission, the prettier your wife will be, right?
Did people tell that to you, Al, when you were a missionary?
Left and right, but usually it's tongue in cheek, right? I mean, missionaries, they'll say it, but for the most part, it's like, oh yeah, just kind of a joke thing. Like, yeah, if you work really hard on your mission, then you get a really hot wife. And what this person's saying is that, well, all that does is objectify women. And how would you feel if you were trying to get engaged to some young lady, and she says, well, I was always promised that if I was very valiant in young women's and got my young women of, what's the young women's medallion?
Medallion, yeah, young women's medallion.
Yeah, if I got my young women's medallion and was very faithful, then I would have a very rich husband. But you work at McDonald's, so, pass. I mean, that's the equivalent, right?
Well, all I can say is I, first of all, worked extremely hard on my mission. Very, very hard. I was definitely, you line up all the missionaries who are in my mission, like a thought experiment. You put them on, we had about 200 missionaries, and I promise you I was in those top 5. Without question, I worked very hard. And all I can tell you is my wife is pretty hot, so it seemed to work. But is that just
work.
that's apparently that is sexist and patriarchal?
Yeah, it is. But it's also it's just another one of those lines of reasoning, kind of akin to the whole, well, women are so sacred that they don't, and so holy, they don't need the priesthood. Men need the priesthood in order to make them holy. But this is just a way of gatekeeping and saying, well, we're going to punch down on women. This is something that a lot of Mormons had issue with Under the Banner of Heaven, that Brenda Lafferty, when she joined the Lafferty family, she went out and started clearing the field with all the men and the boys, which that was men's work. And boy, that family looked real sternly at her and said, "We really don't approve of this, women doing man's work." But she was able-bodied. She was able, and she had a great time doing it. Just digging in, doing some work. She wasn't afraid of getting her hands dirty. But that was kind of the whole thing, is there's always been this divide, and it's not unique to Mormonism. This is more of an old school patriarchal way of thinking that, man's work is out in the field, women's work is in the kitchen. And, so while the men are out clearing the field, the women are there making lemonade and sandwiches. So, getting lunch going.
Well, that sounds really good at this point, by the way.
Well, it sure does, doesn't it?
Okay. Now, so there is a hot white trope among the male missionaries.
Mhm.
And also, this article points out that there is also a candy bar exercise for the young
Mhm.
women's organizations. Uh,
Yeah.
what exactly is that?
Let me go back to that. Okay,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
yeah, the candy bar exercise. So let's see.
Here, let me read this to you.
Yeah, please do.
Upon entering the room, each girl is given, this is a young women's activity for girls, okay? So upon entering the room, each girl is given a different kind of candy bar, and each candy bar is supposed to represent a potential future husband and his qualities. For example, the Snickers guy is supposed to be avoided because his sense of humor tends towards the snarky, and he makes sarcastic comments about the church. But when I first heard about the story, it's the $100,000 bar that the young man was presented that a young man was presented as a goal for which young women should aspire. So they're trying to get the candy bar that is the most expensive and valuable.
That's right. Yeah, I found it. I lost my spot for a second there, but thank you very much for explaining that. So they do it on both sides, and what this does is it really sets up marriage to start off on the wrong foot. That you're looking at the wrong things, you're looking at the wrong priorities. And if you want to have a successful marriage and a successful family, then you need to study things more along the lines of patience and tolerance, understanding, forbearance, love, kindness. These are the sort of things that make for a happy marriage, not just the symmetry of your wife's face or the hourglass shape of her figure, or the size of the guy's bank account. This is something that they should do a better job setting marriage up for success, rather than hanging on to these very basic tropes that really are not unique.
Yeah, the article points out that what happens if the beautiful trophy wife gets old or fat, or
Yeah,
if
exactly.
the handsome returned missionary loses his six-figure salary or his
Mm-hmm.
testimony of the church.
That's right.
Will the marriage continue to grow, or will it shrivel?
Yeah, because that's something that isn't taken into account. Is that sometimes things happen in life that we don't have any, we don't have any preparation for. Just met a young couple this last weekend, and the husband, he had a stroke a few years ago, and it really could have impacted their marriage. But boy, they had such a loving relationship between them, and his wife was just committed to. There was a lot of commitment there. She loved him right through it, and because of her love, he was very motivated to go through the rehab to get his physical therapy going. He walked out of the hospital when they thought maybe he will never walk again. He had to relearn everything, and he did relearn everything. And
Wow.
I couldn't even tell that the guy had a stroke. But that's the kind of things that you need to prepare for in marriage: is how are you going to weather the storms? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good point. Okay, and that takes us to our final article. Let me just summarize this final article real quick, Al, before
Yeah,
we get
go
your
ahead.
thoughts here. And that's this is the Hulu's Mormon No More miniseries, and we're going to review
Mhm.
episode 2. And this was put out on June 24th, 2022 from redcarpettv.com.
Mhm.
And the title of the article is Now Streaming Mormon No More, Hulu original doc series about Mormons and their Mormon LGBTQ allies and their relationship with the church. Now, let me summarize the article real quick.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
in episode 2, Sally's ex-husband Shane
Mhm.
initiates a meetup for the first time in over 2 years, and how Lena's former mission president reacted when she came out to him, and then finally, moms and allies co-opt a Mormon symbol in support of LGBTQ people. So there's 3 parts of the series. So what did you think about the meetup from Sally's ex-husband Shane, Al?
It was it was kind of designed to be awkward. Sally, it looks like she's trying to do her best to get along, but she's also the one that kind of initiates a lot of the awkwardness. And that bothered me, because I really think that Shane is trying his best to figure it out, but it's a difficult thing for him too. All right, he didn't ask for a divorce. She ended up. They tell their story about how he started questioning the LDS Church and looking into its past and doctrines, and she, as a result, he ended up bringing her with him into that rabbit hole, as they call it, and finding their way out of the church. So he left the church before she did, but she was just right there with him. And then that's when she decided to break up their marriage and go after her friend Lena, and that's how we came to this. Is there was just this really. He that was another thing. Is like, okay, he made a choice to make a change, and he couldn't choose what the consequences would be. But one of the consequences was that his wife came out as a lesbian, left him, and took their kids to live with her girlfriend, and that's where we're at in episode 2. So I mean,
Yeah,
they're
episode
trying.
2. Yeah,
Yeah.
episode 2, the subtitle is On a Mission, I Get the Rest of My Life to Live the Truth. Now, Lena, she
Mm-hmm.
went on a mission. She was a missionary, and she went to Italy on her mission. And during the episode, she calls her former Mormon mission president and came out to him on the phone. How did that go?
Okay, so this one was really awkward to watch because it's a conversation that is going to be difficult, and we can see that she's nervous to have that conversation, and there's the person on the other end of the phone. He has no preparation for this. He doesn't know what's going on, so
Right.
we don't get to hear his voice and what he says. We just get to have a summary from Sally, actually, because she's sitting there holding her ear close to the phone so that she can hear it. And Lena comes out to her mission president, and he says, "Yeah, I've heard that your marriage ended and that you've left your husband for someone else." And she says, "Well, I'm not married yet, but I am engaged to her, and we will be getting married soon." So she makes a point of saying that yes, it is a girl that I'm engaged to, and she said, "Well, what kind of relationship can I expect to have from you going forward?" I feel like she really put him on the spot, and then she was disappointed because he wasn't going to change the way that he believed, or wasn't going to change to accommodate her. It just seemed like, well, if this is the choice that you're making, which it is a choice that she made, and this is something that really rubs me raw on this, is that this is about choices. I mean, for as much as they're saying, well, I didn't choose to fall in love and be a lesbian, that's fair, but you did choose to follow that, and you did choose to come out to your mission president, who still is very entrenched in the LDS teachings and doctrines. What do you expect him to do? I think that there's a lot of expectations from Sally and Lena for the rest of the world to accommodate them, but I don't see them reciprocating that. And that's one of the things that really bothers me in this series. Is that,
Interesting.
yeah, that I don't see a lot of that being reciprocated. But I do think that this episode was a lot better than the first one. And once again, for the other stories that were out there.
Now, Al, I did not have anywhere near the type of relationship with my mission president than apparently that
No,
Lena had with her more mission president. I didn't tell him when I got married. I didn't tell him when I had kids. I didn't tell him
no,
any of my life decisions or anything like that.
yeah.
Um, I mean, is that something that you share with your mission president? Is some of your life milestones?
Neither of them. I had two mission presidents. They split halfway through. Well, they changed mission presidents halfway through my mission, and so I had 1 year under one mission president and 1 year under the other mission president. I haven't talked to either of them in probably a good 20 years. It's not really. We don't walk in the same circles. I did see one of my mission presidents shortly after, so I know that there's missionaries out there that do keep in touch with their mission presidents, and they'll talk to them from time to time. My dad was a mission president. He has his former missionaries that they'll still good friends with, probably a good handful of them. But I don't see him, especially with the sisters, having a lot of these long phone conversations where they're looking to him for fatherly guidance, and that's what Lena describes him as kind of a father figure to her that really helped her through a lot of difficult times. I'm not sure if it's difficult times just on the mission or difficult times post mission, but she threw a curveball at him, and she was surprised when he towed the line that he's always towed.
I
So
mean, I don't think very many missionaries that I'm familiar with, or that that I hang out with or talk
mhm.
to, really keep that careful.
No,
Keep in touch with their old mission presidents.
no,
So
they
I mean,
don't.
I guess it might be a different relationship than she had with her mission president, because I don't seek my mission president's validation for anything, and I never did.
No.
You know, he was the manager of the mission.
Mhm.
I reported to God. I
Yeah.
didn't report to my mission president. It was
Mhm.
about when I had my exit interview with my mission president. I didn't ask him, well, how do you think I did? I don't care
Yeah.
how he felt about my mission, because my mission
Mhm.
was about me and my relationship with God. It had
Mhm.
virtually nothing to do with him. He was just there as a placeholder.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess some people need that kind of validation.
Right.
I
I can't
didn't.
relate. I can't
Yeah.
relate. I cannot relate to that at all. I
Yeah.
don't need any validation from my mission president. Never have.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
guess that's the
So
difference.
sorry, Lena. We're just not. We come from a different place than you do on this one. It just seemed to me that you're, especially when you're talking about a church representative, a mission president is definitely a church representative.
A compensated church
Yeah,
representative.
yeah, for sure. So even though he may not be on the payroll anymore after his mission is over, he's still, that's up to him where he's at with his spiritual journey. And she just kind of dropped a bomb on him and expected him to just fall all over her and say, "Oh, yeah, I still love you. I still respect you, no
You
matter
know.
what." And sorry, mission presidents don't have a requirement to love you unconditionally. They're not your parents. They're
Yeah.
representative for the church.
Yeah, and that takes us to the last third of the episode, which was with
Mhm.
lighting the why. Al, what
Yeah.
is the why, and what is it?
Okay, so the iconic Y is they call it Y Mountain. There's a big concrete white rock covered, in the shape of the letter Y on the mountain above Brigham Young University. I guess the Y is for young, for Brigham or Brigham Young, and so a lot of times they'll light up the Y for different occasions, like for homecoming, for graduation. The college will go up there and light up the Y itself. The property is owned by BYU, at least where the Y is. The trail is on BLM land, so it's public land to get up to the Y, which is about 1.1 mile hike straight up the hill. It's kind of a brutal hike. You hear these people after they've made the hike and they're all huffing
Yeah,
and puffing.
yeah.
It takes a little bit, about an
Hmm.
hour to get up there. So this group of people called Color the Campus have decided they're going to show support for the LGBTQ community by hiking up the Y and taking a bunch of colored spotlights to change the Y into a rainbow and also into the trans flag, which is the pink, blue, and white. So yeah, BYU's not having it. They saw the first one, and at that point, they went and blocked off access to the Y so that people couldn't actually get to the actual Y up on the mountain. It's 300 and some odd feet tall. This thing, so it's real big. But they got 40 people together and they hiked the Y. The BYU police were standing there, which BYU police, they're not official city police, they're university cops. So they do have some jurisdiction, but not a lot. They work more hand in hand with Provo police, and they do work very closely with Provo police. So they get Provo police up there to get them off the Y.
Yeah. So what did you think about the segment?
I thought the representative from BYU was very respectful and tactful in the way that he approached it, and for them being determined to go through with something that they knew was illegal, and these people they knew that they were facing the possibility of $1,000 fine, some jail time, and a criminal record. I mean, that's what was going to happen, and they decided that this was worth it, so they went ahead with it. And the BYU representative said, I want to respectfully ask you to leave, because this is not a place for demonstrations, and we don't want this kind of activity going up here. And they had planned on doing a half an hour of the trans flag colors and then a half hour of the rainbow flag colors. But they ended up, I think, doing 15 minutes of each. So there was a compromise. And
Yeah,
no,
I mean,
but
I, I obviously I read in the papers about the lighting of the Y, but I had no idea that there was a camera crew that was following them for their entire journey, and it seemed like they built the suspense for this segment really well.
oh, they really did. They played it out very well. And, it helped me to understand the purpose behind that and the logistics behind it. It took a lot of organizing.
Yeah.
This young man that headed up the organization, he's an openly gay BYU student.
Hmm.
And his parents support him. In his lifestyle also, it's a little strange to me that you've got these students that sign the honor code and then expect the university to change to accommodate them.
Well,
I think it's great to be yourself, but you gotta understand what you're getting yourself into. And if you can't abide by the honor code any longer, don't expect the university to change to accommodate you. You need to go find a different university that will accommodate you.
I hear what you're saying. The qualm that I have with that, and again,
Yeah,
I taught at BYU for a long time. The only qualm that I have with that is some people don't realize their sexual orientation until later on in life.
that's true. And that,
So
yeah.
if you're a student and you're in your third year, you didn't realize that you're
Mhm.
gay, you didn't realize that you're, transgender or whatever it is until
Mhm.
your third year, that becomes much more of a different predicament than I
Yeah.
think that somebody who, honestly, I don't want to sound bigoted, but if you already
Mhm.
know that you're gay,
Mhm.
let's just be real honest. BYU is not the best school for you to attend.
True.
It just isn't. There's a lot of schools out there where you will have a much better experience.
Yeah.
I think
Exactly.
that's what you're saying.
That is exactly what I'm saying. And for those that discover their sexuality later on, like you say, into their third or fourth year there, yeah, you can be locked into it, but then it's a matter of choice. How important it is to you to be out and open about that versus how important it is to you to finish your degree, to finish your program, and you're going to have to make some choices there. There's a lot to do with commitment, and it seems like commitment really gets thrown out the window with this Mormon No More series. Um, and that's the issue that I have, is that if you're committed to going to BYU, then you're going to have to put your authentic lifestyle on hold. And it's that sounds cruel, but it's just kind of it's the way that you are. I mean, you've made a commitment to university that you're not going to engage in homosexual activity. Well, if you find out that you're a homosexual, then you're going to have to make the choice not to engage in homosexual activity for until you graduate, and then wave your flag all you want after you graduate. It's not, that's your time to shine. But it certainly could come with academic repercussions if you decide that, well, I'm going to be a student and I'm going to be openly sexual.
Yeah. I don't know. It just this episode really shines a light
Mhm.
on how difficult it is to try to navigate
Yeah,
that path.
it certainly is. And I don't want to disparage the LGBTQ community that way. I just felt like that kind of needed to be said, with regards to these choices that these people are making. And I support people in being their authentic selves and living their authentic life. It's just I see a lot of wanting, especially with Lena and her mission president. She wants to eat her cake, but then still have it too. And
Yeah.
I don't think you can do both.
I guess a lot of these people are just they want to reform the institution,
Yeah.
whether it's the church or BYU.
Uh huh.
And they're trying to, as we've discussed in previous podcasts, change often occurs when people, you know, don't just bury themselves and want to shine a light on what they feel is an injustice, and
Yeah.
I think that's what they're trying to do.
Exactly. And I think it's coming naturally because the more people that come out, then they have an influence on their groups around them and their circles that they move in. So then all of a sudden, people become more resistant um, to bullying the people that are different from them or picking on the LGBTQ community because they know somebody who's LGBTQ, somebody that they care about, whether it's a brother, a sister. We talked about some different things and statistics with that, but this is something that it impacts everybody, and so as it does impact everybody, it changes minds one mind at a time, and we've seen the tide turning with this, where you have much more support for the LGBTQ community. So it is going the direction that's positive, but I just that I think we need to also understand that not everybody is the same, and not everybody needs to. I guess that's kind of the underlying theme is we're not all the same, so let's accept everybody where they're at, and some of those people where they're at is where that mission president's at, firmly entrenched in his religion and stuck in his own beliefs. And it's far better to accept and respect him where he's at than to try and force him to change, because sooner or later he'll come around. He'll figure it out.
Okay, for our listeners out there, we're on Patreon. If you made it this far, I want to thank you so much for being with us. Drop us a like, drop us a subscription, leave us a comment. Head over to Patreon if you want to hear more of these episodes. We would love to make them for you. And I want to thank my co-host Al for ruminating on the Great and Spacious Beehive with me.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much, Dives. And thank you to Weird Alma, who's done our intro and outro music. Look up he's on Bandcamp. Let's see, his album is titled Straight Outta Titles, with Straight Outta in the title. And he's got some excellent songs there.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a being with no moral constraints. My number one goal is to hurt the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.